everyone. So today's video is all about how to nail your virtual job interview. I'm super excited to get into this topic with you. I've had a number of requests and it's clearly something that many of us are going to have to now encounter in this new hybrid way of working. So I've got a few steps, I think it's about 5 that I'm going to share with you. And the first couple are all about how to get off to a great start, because as we know, a lot of the challenge with interviews is starting well. Once you start well, you're flying, you're confident, positive emotions are flowing, you've got momentum, and it all builds from there. So we really want to get you off to a great start. 2 aspects to this, one very practical. In a non-virtual world, you would have arrived at your interview on time, probably had your travel methods all planned and maybe some backup ones planned too. And likewise, in the virtual world, we want to have all of our technology lined up. We want to have a backup for that technology and a backup for that as well. So that means that if you're doing it on your laptop, you also have your mobile phone charged up and ready to connect to the video conferencing technology. You perhaps have let them know via email what your mobile number is in case of any technology connection issues, and perhaps you even have a backup video conferencing link if that one isn't working for any reason. So what you don't want is for any reason technology to fail you here. The other thing is this is a great opportunity to arrive a little bit early. So what I've started to notice is for any kind of big speaking events or facilitation sessions or even big meetings, I've noticed people are starting to kind of queue up from about 10 minutes before, because everyone wants to make sure they're able to dial in and that their technology is working. So if you all do this, let's say you've got a panel of people interviewing you or you've got a couple of people interviewing you, it may well be that you get 5 or so minutes which are that little bit more informal before the clock strikes 0 and you actually commence your interview. So it's really worth planning to be dialing in at least 5 minutes, and I would say 5 to 10 minutes before the scheduled time. Certainly not once the clock has hit 0, because that is when you can guarantee that your technology will suddenly be slow and everything will take that little bit longer. You want to have all of that part nailed, just as you would if you were traveling to your interview. You also, of course, want to think about your square or your rectangle. What do you want to show in the background? Spend the time making sure that if there is anything, that's there, or if you want to keep it completely plain, or if you want to put on one of the virtual backgrounds that they have on Teams or Zoom, those can work really well as well, and they can almost be quite neutralizing because they keep things focused on you and everybody is aware that they're a virtual background. So just have a little bit of a think about that and how you want that to come across. Maybe get some feedback from a friend or your partner and somebody, just for people to be able to say, actually, what I'm seeing in that rectangle is the kind of person that I want to be hiring. So you've got all of that set up. And then the second part is starting well. And the beginning of the interview is often the bit where you feel the most nervous, and everybody's going to feel it. It's a natural thing. If we think about the hormones that are going around in our body, this is a natural thing. 2 things that we can do here. 1, we can diffuse. And the way that you can diffuse is by just gently sharing your feelings with people. So you can say something like, getting used to this new virtual way of doing interviews, a little bit nerve-wracking and exciting. Or you can ask them, so how are you finding conducting all of your interviews virtually now? Are you finding it easier or harder? What are the pros and cons? And so you guys can all kind of connect over this, and it can just really diffuse whatever you're feeling. A few months ago, I had to be on a stage in Clubhouse with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee in front of 500 people. I had less than an hour's notice and I was feeling the nerves. And so I spoke to my husband before and he just said, look, why don't you just say, feeling a little bit nervous, this is a big room. And I did a version of that. I said, nervous and excited to be here. And as I did that, I felt the tension leaving my body. So I am now somebody that always finds a way to professionally, but in an open way, share my emotion for any high stakes virtual interaction. Because you don't have the benefits of the physical connection with people, you do sometimes need to spell these things out, and that can therefore create those connections. So you've diffused some tension, you've perhaps also viewed it through a different lens. So I also like to say, those butterflies you're feeling. They're also excitement. So you can use that kind of language as well. Yeah, I'm excited as well. I'm nervous and excited. And you can therefore tap into the exciting part. And therefore you might be more animated and you might enjoy that aspect of it. So that little bit of a reframe there into excitement can be valuable there as well. Now I want to get into the meat of the interview. And again, there are two aspects here. One is for you to step back and think, okay, what is it that I want them to walk away with? People walk away from these type of interactions with a feeling. They might walk away feeling really assured and confident that you are somebody who has the competence to deliver. And that's probably one of the key things that you want them to walk away with. What else is it? If it is a sales meeting, then you might want them to think, wow, she struck up a good rapport with us. She's going to do that with our clients or our sales prospects. If it is a consulting or a training role, then you want them to be able to see you delivering that training almost in that interview session. They want to see your ability to command and be able to share and teach and tell a story perhaps. So never underestimate the fact that whilst you are busy answering their questions, they are also looking at you through the lens of, can I see this person in the role? And that is one of the biggest things. Can I put them in front of my client? When I ask them a challenging question, are they immediately phased or are they leaning into those questions? And I will come on to that in a little bit more detail. So jot down, what are 3 to 5 things that you think in their shoes you would probably be wanting to feel, and I am talking about that kind of gut and that more emotional feel about your interaction, and make sure you are aware of those and that your behavior during that interview is aligned with those. Don't get too focused on the questions and let your perhaps more analytical, detail-oriented, or even perfectionistic, in search of the best answer personality. Don't let that part dominate when actually what they want to know is perhaps that you can be a smooth operator in high stakes situations, for example, or that you'd be able to be a good negotiator for them. So we've nailed that part. The other bit, and this is probably more of the standard interview technique stuff, but nonetheless we don't want to forget it, and that is that every job will have a set of competencies. And so you want to have nailed you made a list of 5 to 7 of those competencies, and then you want to have a corresponding set of 5 to 10 of your best examples from your work, whether it was freelance work or whether it was employed work, the best stuff in your previous portfolios stories that can speak to those competencies that they're going to want to see examples of. And the best thing is where you can pick some multi-dimensional examples. So what you want to do is you want to pick 5 or so stories which could be used in lots of different interview scenario questions. And whilst that might sound a little bit complicated or taxing, what I love about this is if you sit down and you ask yourself, okay, what are 5 of the work experiences that I am most proud of in my life? In some ways, you want to make them aware of those in your interview, and you want to be able to use those to answer some of their questions. So you want to have those at the ready. The beauty of this virtual setting is that you can actually have those notes nearby. I mean, you could even have them on a little stand next to the computer screen and just, to jolt your memory. But the point is that you want to be prepared on those. Other than your behavior during the interview, the examples are going to be the thing that enable them to picture you being able to do the role that they are trying to hire you for. And then again, this is more of a standard interview technique type thing, but when you're telling those stories, you want to go STAR, so situation, task, action, and result. And that is a very simple way of telling whatever story it is that you need to be able to answer their competency question, which, let's face it, an interview is not really a job interview unless they're going to ask some competency questions. So you've got to be able to predict a few of those. Me being quite a conscientious interviewee type person, I would have typically, in the various interview processes I've been in, I would have brainstormed a good 20 of those questions, and then I'm pretty unsurprised when some of those come up. Obviously, other ones come up as well, and that's where my multifaceted examples are often the best way of being able to hang on some more competencies. So have your stories, have your examples ready. You've got the content, but you've also got the impression that you're giving just by showing up in that interview. The final thing that I'm going to talk about here is questions. Now, this comes up a lot for me. I get asked a lot, okay, well, what shall I ask them at the end when they say, have you got any questions? And I don't want to ask anything too factual about the company because I could have looked that up, or they might think, why doesn't she know that? Some of my favorite kind of questions are questions that get them thinking. And obviously I'm a coach, so I like to ask these kind of questions. But, where do you see this business in 3 years? Or what do you see the potential of this business is in 3 years? And then if you find yourself able to go that bit deeper to say, and what are the competencies that you need to see in your people to be able to achieve that vision? And so what you're doing there is you're really enabling them to think about those big picture questions, and you're almost bringing yourself into that vision as well. The other thing I love about those kind of questions is that if you then want to follow up, you've got some really clear answers that they will have given you about those competencies for you to be able to follow up with. And that brings me to my final point. I am a follower-upper over email. I find some hook. Normally, it's also because I regret some part of the interview. I wish I'd answered it slightly differently, or I feel like there was something extra that I could have added. And I've learned over many painful years to turn that into an opportunity for follow-up. So whether it was a fluffer, like maybe I've fluffed something and I want to rephrase it, I will follow up and say, there was one thing that I reflected on after the interview that I wish I maybe framed differently, and that was X. And I find that little bit of follow-up via email is always a nice way to keep some connection afterwards. But you don't need to do that. That is probably speaking to my past self, somebody that was quite I did overanalyze the interviews afterwards. But it could be that they mention something of interest and you send them a link saying, we discussed this piece of research, here's a link to it, you might find this interesting as well. And you're just showing that you really, tuned in to what they were focusing on during that session, and that you want to keep that relationship alive afterwards. And the other thing I like about that is that even if you aren't successful this time, they will always remember you as somebody that bothered to follow up after the interview. My advice is, don't worry about whether you should or you shouldn't. There's nothing wrong with a little follow-up over email. So, good luck for your interview. I'm sure it will go really well, and I hope that you enjoy the process. I think some of the best interviews are the ones where you come out exhilarated and you feel energized, and you know that it was challenging. You might have said a few things better, but you made that connection and you shared some of your great work that you've done over the years. So let me know how it goes, and I will be back with more content for you next week. Bye-bye.